If you're seeking the perfect accompaniment to your leisurely day off or a moment of laughter or chill shared with friends, this compilation is precisely what you need. Sit back, relax, and let the fun begin. As we delve into the stories from this week, there's one particular gem that stands out above the rest, destined to capture your heart. And hey, don't forget to note down the timestamps of your favorite stories so you can easily share them with others who could use a dose of cheerfulness. Without further ado, let's press play and let the entertainment begin. Story 1. My wife and I are realtors in Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley to be exact. We were on caravan with a colleague who is significantly senior to us and has been in the market a long time. We went to a new listing and my colleague said, "Oh, I know this house," in an off-putting tone. We asked what she knew and she said, "I'll tell you when we leave." It's a lovely little home in a multi-million-dollar area of Sherman Oaks. Clearly has had a few different owners over the years. And although it cosmetically needs a lot of work, you would be thrilled to own a sweet home like this in that neighborhood. The asking price was well over $1 million. When we leave, I inquire again from my colleague about what she knew of the house. It turns out a family that lived there in the early 80s was brutally, and I mean very brutally, unalived and tortured in a home invasion. Apparently, it was quite a big story in the area at that time, and as I said, she is significantly senior to me and has been a realtor in LA since the late 70s. But there was no internet then, and time moves on. We got a little obsessed. My wife and I are true crime fans about the house and wanted to see if we could dig anything up. After a little bit of time scouring the internet and newspaper archives, we couldn't find anything. That really bothered me. As a realtor and someone who really tries to be an extraordinary service provider for my clients, I want to be able to provide that kind of information to a client. It's so easy now to Google something and expect the entire history of that thing to come up, but it's not until you experience a situation like this that you realize not everything is available online. Now, for the really messed up part. California real estate law is such that you have to disclose a death on the property if it occurred within 3 years of that death. However, if the death was violent and you know about it, you have the obligation to give that information to your client no matter when it occurred. But if you don't have that information, then you're perfectly well within the law. I've come across lots of homes where there have been a death on the property, but if it's a normal death, it's usually not that big a deal to your clients. However, an unnatural death is a big deal for most clients. All I could think of was the many agents and brokers who were in the house and the agents selling the house, and how probably none of them knew what I knew, albeit after the fact. I'm not a big believer in the paranormal, and I'm not scared of ghosts, but I certainly wouldn't want to be the new owner of that house. Imagine spending $1 million on your dream home and not knowing something as horrific as that happened there. I have other stories, but this is the one that always stuck with me. I always look at a home for sale as if I were the one buying it. This one got to me. House in the 80s. And something bad happened there. Yes, that is tragic. Again, I may be out of touch with the housing market. I don't know if it would bug me that much. I mean, unless there's physical evidence that's still all over the place. If I could get a good house at a good price, there's a lot I'd be willing to overlook. Story 2. I've been witness to a few and heard of some others. The first one involves a couple who bought a house in the 1980s. They called me a couple years ago wanting to sell. As we're talking, the wife starts telling me about her difficult pregnancies and how she'd been pregnant many times but lost them all. I feel bad for her, but I'm wondering what this has to do with anything. The husband pipes up and says, "After the last one, I didn't know what to do. I came home, and the first thing I thought to do was remodel the kitchen. I had to break something." He goes on about his impromptu kitchen demolition, dishes still in the cabinets and everything. The guy was devastated that they'd lost another baby. Anyway, he says he's ripping out a corner, and he always knew there was a dead pocket there because the span was like 3 feet, but the closet behind it was only 2 feet deep. He rips out the drywall and finds a ball of cloth. As he pulls back the layers, he realizes it's the skeleton of a baby. It was wrapped up with a teddy bear. He called the police and said they never got any follow-up on it. The next was from another realtor I knew. They get a closing and the seller is late. An hour goes by and he's still a no-show. The agent is calling and getting no answer. She knew the seller's nephew who let her in once or something, so she calls him. He drives over to check on his uncle. He opens the door, and there's the uncle, unalive on the floor. He's wearing his coat and has one shoe on. He perished putting his shoes on so he could go to the closing. And yes, the buyer still bought the house, but it took a few extra weeks to close. Another one from my own experience was a house I was asked to sell. It was a fixer-upper, but it was on a nice plot of land. The sellers had some weird relationship going on. She was in her 20s and he was in his 50s. They were married, but she called him Daddy, and she dressed like a party girl. They were not well off by any means, so it's not like she was with him for the money. Anyway, I decided to Google their names to see what came up. They'd been busted for running a puppy mill in the garage, and all the dogs were discovered frozen solid in the dead of winter and severely malnourished. After that, I just ignored them. I couldn't even talk to them to tell them I wasn't going to list their house. And the last two are the most outrageous. I'm going to have to hunt it down, though. It's long, and I posted it a long time ago. We'll update shortly. Edit? It's too long. Had to make it a separate response. Hunt around or check my recent history if you're interested. I wonder if that story is going to show up later on in the video. I can't really tell. That last one is pretty disturbing that they ran a puppy mill in the garage. It also depends on the conditions. I'm pretty sure the conditions of that puppy mill were not conducive to the health of the puppies. That's pretty tragic. Story 3. Well, not me, but a house that my parents own. My father was speaking with a previous owner about anything he needs to know about the house. The previous owner starts mentioning that a man who lived in the house as a tenant was brutally shot and only made it to the backyard before he had perished from loss of blood. The house is located in a very bad area of our city, so shootings are not at all uncommon. Fast forward a few years, and we find out that one of the people living in our house was selling substances. The substance dealer is eventually arrested in that house, leaving his wife, mother-in-law, and daughter in the house. Few years more, and we need to kick out our tenants because they hadn't paid rent in months. A few nights after my parents went to go tell the tenants to leave, or else they were going to get kicked out, the house burst into flames. A very large portion of the house was in ruins. All the kitchen, one of the rooms, and most of the living room burnt to a crisp. Luckily, the insurance covered the damage. Thankfully, the house has been sold. Last thing I heard about it is our now ex-tenant, a new one, was not paying rent and got into a very nasty fistfight with the people in the neighborhood. He got into the house completely covered in blood and bruises. They had to call the ambulance to save the guy, too. A small word of advice, people. If you're going to buy a house, always take location into account. Sometimes buying a house in a dangerous neighborhood for a cheaper price can prove to be a big mistake. The oft-used phrase in our area is location, 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 meaning you can change a lot about a house, fancy it up a bit, but location, the one thing you can't change, can be a deal breaker. Yeah, this sounds like it's more disturbing about the area around the house and not the house itself. It's kind of amazing that they were actually able to rebuild the house. Did they build or remodel? Was there anything that they did as far as building that house that did anything to help sell it? And how were the people being interviewed for this? Was there any way to check up on them? What was the credit checks or the background checks like? Very, very tragic information about that house. Very much about all the several different pieces going on there. Story 4. Okay, so when I was doing the rounds looking to buy my first house, we had made an appointment to view this little college which was totally in our budget. We weren't familiar with the area, so we got there about 45 minutes early. Instead of just waiting around for the agent to show up, we decided to take a tour around the neighborhood and found another property that had an open house on. This one was so not in our budget, but decided to take a look anyway just for shoots and giggles. It was very fancy pants. White marble flooring, gym, its own freaking hairdresser room. Anyway, the property was split level and built on the side of a hill. So I'm super interested in looking at everything just to see how the other half lives, and I go into the laundry room, which was at the back of the bottom level of the house. Off the laundry room, there was another door which was smaller than a standard doorway, lengthways, and I thought, oh cool, a secret passageway. So I go through the doorway, and it's a passageway that runs long ways down the back of the house. One side is the dirt, and the other is gyprock. So I follow the passageway to the end, and it's very dimly lit. And at the end, it opens up into a small room which the current owners were using for storage. I nearly soiled myself when I spotted. There, standing amongst random boxes of who knows what, was a life-freaking-sized replica of Freddy freaking Krueger. I noped the hell out of there, and we left very quickly. Suffice to say that we looked at the other property, but did not put an offer in. That house is still on the market 4 years later. Story 1. Good place to spend an hour learning about all the things you thought were true but aren't. It is rarely necessary to wait 24 hours before filing a missing person report. Despite being referenced commonly in culture and society at large, the idea that Victorian-era doctors invented the vibrator to cure female hysteria via triggering orgasm is a product of a single work rejected by most historians. When a meteor or spacecraft enters the atmosphere, the heat of entry is not primarily caused by friction, but by adiabatic compression of air in front of the object. There is no such thing as an alpha in a wolf pack. An early study that coined the term alpha wolf had only observed unrelated adult wolves living in captivity. In the wild, wolf packs operate more like human families. There's no defined sense of rank. Parents are in charge until the young grow up and start their own families. Younger wolves do not overthrow an alpha to become the new leader, and social dominance fights are situational. Drowning is often inconspicuous to onlookers. In most cases, raising the arms and vocalizing are impossible due to the instinctive drowning response. Exercise-induced muscle soreness is not caused by lactic acid buildup. Water-induced wrinkles are not caused by the skin absorbing water and swelling. They're caused by the autonomic nervous system, which triggers localized vasoconstriction in response to wet skin, yielding a wrinkled appearance. Alcohol does not necessarily kill brain cells. Alcohol can, however, lead indirectly to the death of brain cells in 2 ways. 1. In chronic heavy alcohol users whose brains have adapted to the effects of alcohol, abrupt cessation following heavy use can cause excitotoxicity, leading to cellular death in multiple areas of the brain. 2. In alcoholics who get most of their daily calories from alcohol, a deficiency of thiamine can produce Korsakoff syndrome, which is associated with serious brain damage. Isn't exercise-induced muscle soreness just tearing of the fibers? The drowning one is a very important one. I almost drowned in a pool when I was like 5 or so. I made a step from the shallow end to the deep end, and suddenly it was too difficult for me to keep my head above water. You know when I realized when I was drowning? When I was 19 or something like that, The first time I actually read a drowning description warning of those signs, and I was like, wait a minute. And it isn't like I wasn't conscious or too young. I can remember that moment clearly, and I remember my thought process as well. I never felt like I was drowning. I felt like I screwed up and I just needed to take a step back to the shallow end, either by moving my feet to the floor or grabbing the floating line that separates the shallow and deep end of the pool and pulling myself back. At the same time, I didn't float. My head kept bouncing underwater, so more frantic movement to keep my head above water. But I did manage that, so I wasn't drowning. I was keeping my head out of the water usually, but I didn't have enough movement to do something about moving back to the shallow end without losing momentum and keeping my head above water. I could do one or the other, but not both. But I wasn't drowning. I was just still busy unmessing myself messed up. So yeah, I can definitely understand those weird and ironic stories of how a pool celebrates a year of no drownings, and someone then drowns at the party filled with lifesavers. If you drown, you're not busy making big movements to warn others of your peril. Most likely, you don't even think you're drowning, and you need all your strength and momentum to keep your head above the water, which are small and irregular movements. If the head is bobbing, that is a bad sign. I went through that intro so many times, doing take after take, because a lot of those words really caught me off guard. I'm really glad I finally got through that. So, story 2. That people are good eyewitnesses. We aren't. Our perception of things sucks. We are prone to so many biases that we aren't even aware of. If I grade a paper on an empty stomach, I'll grade them lower than if I'm not hungry. And I will never admit that to be true, even though it is. I was told this story by my forensics teacher a few years ago. It's been some time since I heard it, so some details are fuzzy. My forensics teacher was going out with friends one day. After a day at the mall, their car was only one of a few in the parking lot. It was late-ish at night, so they all hurried to the car. As they were about to drive away, a drunk guy came up to the car and pulled a gun on them. Keep in mind that they all saw the dude's face. They got away fine and reported the incident to the police. When asked to describe the perpetrator, all three of them gave a different description, despite the fact that they all saw the same guy at the same time from relatively the same angle. Human brains are weird. Now think about how many people are behind bars based only on eyewitness testimony. I once ran across the street to help a woman who was lying on the ground. She got up and ran away after being assaulted, and a few minutes later, police showed up, and I told them which way she went. They asked me for a description. A few minutes later, I passed her again while walking up the block. The only thing I got right was her hair color and that she was wearing a dark shade. I thought she was wearing a winter jacket, but she really just had a hoodie on. Thought she was wearing jeans and winter boots, but it was black leggings and sneakers. I was kneeling beside her and had my hand on her back before she ran off, and I still couldn't accurately tell what she was wearing. I think that one's very true. That reminds me of the scenes in the movie My Cousin Vinny, where the lawyer just completely decimates everybody's eyewitness accounts. I mean, it's true that the person there was not wearing glasses when they were supposed to, and the one about the grits and the time it took to view what was happening was very interesting. But yeah, I think that's a very interesting one as well. We are very biases in what we see. Story 3. In medical school, we're taught that common things are common, and that when you hear hooves, think horses, not zebras, meaning that we should always assume the most obvious diagnosis. Medical students almost always jump to the rarest disease when taking multiple choice tests or when they first go into clinical rotations and see real patients. Yes, and it's not just medicine. How much of IT is eliminated with, "Have you tried turning it off and on again? Is everything plugged in?" But sadly, this does mean that when you've got a truly complicated problem, you have to slog through the simple solutions talk. It's always DNS. Even when it isn't, it is. And the most important lesson? It's never lupus. Until it is. Unless your name is House. I once presented with knee pain. Because I mentioned I had probably done it weightlifting, the docs panicked, told me to never lift again, had me keep my weight off it, and walk with a cane for months while awaiting an MRI for a suspected crushed or split meniscus. I got through all those previous ones, all those words in the first story, only to be tripped up by meniscus. Had I gone to a sports physio, it's likely I'd have been told it was a mild inflammation from valgus collapse and to improve my form. Fair play, they did their best, but they saw zebra. Ditto when I got my blood tested and my estrogen was so low they suspected early menopause. Got to hospital, consultant redid the bloods and showed me they were fine. Estrogen fluctuates a lot, and it's been worried over nothing. It's not just about seeing zebra. If there's something in the river that's either a log or a gator, then it's prudent to err on the side of the dangerous and not go swimming. I can also agree on the IT side of it. It just reminds me of the show The IT Crowd. "Hello, IT, have you tried turning it off and on again?" It's usually that. When I have a problem with my computer, a lot of times I just need to restart it because I haven't started it up again in a while. Story 4. If you're in a relationship but develop feelings for someone else, break up with them, because if you truly love them, you wouldn't love the second person. Hogwash. Don't cheat. Don't have an emotional affair, but figure out what's going on in your heart and your head before throwing away a loving relationship over a crush. One size does not fit all. This is often said by people obsessed with the idea that everyone has the one. No one has just one person just made for them. You can love lots of people. You can get along with lots of people. You might love multiple people at once or no one at all. All these are perfectly acceptable and normal. The only thing not normal and acceptable is hurting people you love because you can't keep it in your pants if you and your partner want that. I've been struggling with this for a while now. My one passed away 6 months ago. One of the things she told me before it happened, she was terminally ill, so it didn't come out of nowhere, was that she wanted me to love again. And I can't help but think, what if I still love her more than the next person? It feels like a betrayal to her, and like it isn't fair to whoever comes next. I don't know, the few people I have said this to dismissively say, "It's not time for thinking that," or "You know she would want you to be happy," or something similar. Sorry to just drop that on you. Story 5. When I worked in spectator event safety, we learned, sports stadia, that when an evacuation is happening, the safest place to go is the playing field, as it's usually open air and therefore low risk if it's a fire evacuation. However, common sense takes over crowd dynamics, and people try leaving the way they came in, from the other side of the building. So this common sense trait results in thousands of people flocking into burning buildings. An example of this was the Bradford City Stadium fire. A huge chunk of the crowd headed back into the burning stadium looking for exits, despite open air, the pitch being meters in front of them. Sometimes, planning and training can count against you. Look at the Piper Alpha disaster in the North Sea. They were trained to muster in the fireproof accommodation block and await rescue. The only people that survived broke training and jumped over the side. Grenfell Tower Fire, UK. Any residents of the tower who called the fire service were told to remain in their flat unless it was affected, which is the standard policy for a fire in a high-rise building, as each flat should be fireproofed from its neighbors. Wikipedia. Many survivors told how they ignored this advice. 72 people perished from that fire. Who knows how many would have escaped had that advice not delayed them while the fire spread. Story 1. Okay, nothing hugely major, but years ago, 97, I was on tour with a small musical theater production. I was the technical director. We were in a chalet-style hotel in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. They gave me a non-smoking room, but at the time I was a pack-a-day smoker, so I smoked in the room. A few hours later, I heard a high-pitched beeping. The source is hard to discern because of the high-pitched ceilings in the room. I look up and see in the light a cloud of cigarette smoke floating near the peak of the angled ceiling, and nearby, the smoke detector, which has a little red flashing light. Dang, it seems I set off the smoke alarm. I immediately jump up on the bed, grab a pillow, and begin fanning over my head. It was a high ceiling, and I'm 6'2". Beep, beep, beep. The thing wouldn't stop, but oddly enough, the main alarms are not going off. The hotel is not being cleared. Beep, beep, beep. After minutes of fanning, I can't take it anymore. I start throwing my shoes at the smoke alarm. A few good dings in the drywall later, I scored a direct hit or two. The alarm was damaged, now hanging by the wall by the attached wires. AC alarm, not batteries. Beep, 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 frick. The dang thing won't shut up. In a rage, I grabbed the aluminum pipe frame suitcase stand, the kind that folds, by one leg, and I start jumping on the bed, swinging at the peak of each leap towards the infernal machine. With each miss, the black rubber feet leave a black streak across the off-white walls. Finally, I scored a direct hit. The alarm flew off of its wires across the room, and I swear to the flying spaghetti monster, landed in the waste can near the television. I'm elated, momentarily. Then I realized, beep, 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 it's still there. Does it have a battery backup? What the hell? I get down off the bed, bend over the waste can, only to realize that the 80s-era hotel television, which had an LED clock on the face, had a built-in alarm clock, which was going off. I hit the faded off button, and the beeping finally stopped. I don't think I mentioned it at checkout, and I never heard another thing about it. True story. Too long didn't read? I thought the smoke alarm in my hotel room was going off, trashed the walls trying to stop it, only realizing it was the alarm clock. I don't know about you, but I'm picturing Rowan Atkinson in my head. You know, Mr. Bean. This sounds like a skit that he would definitely have done. I can just imagine it, too. I almost want to go back and rewatch Mr. Bean to see if he actually did something like this. Story 2. I was living in a duplex in Lahaina, Maui. One day, my next-door neighbor came over and told me to come look at something. Outside, between our two units, was a standpipe with a water spigot on the end. It stood about 2 feet high and was only a couple inches from the house, which was a cinder block structure on a concrete slab. He took the standpipe in his hand and pulled it to the side so it was about at a 45-degree angle. Water came gushing forth from under the house. Well, cool, we thought. Not that he did not turn the faucet, he turned the standpipe like a lever. Note that. So in a few days, whenever we had a visitor, we'd show them our amazing water pipe. Reader, you already know where this is going. Yes, it happened on my watch. I turned the standpipe, and the water came out. Then I turned it back, and the water kept coming out. Then it fell over. The pipe was broken, and the water was coming out faster than ever. Fortunately, the landlord lived next door. Unfortunately, he wasn't home. There weren't any cell phones in those days, and nobody at either duplex had a phone. Not that it would have done any good, because I had no idea who to call or what to do. We lived about 4 blocks from town, which was a street along the waterfront. So I rode my bike down to use a phone. I don't remember who I called, but everybody told me somebody else to call, until I was calling a sugar refinery. Then I looked up our street, and yes, here it came. The water. A nice, fat, steady stream of water. I watched it run into the gutter, down a drain, and then I walked across the street to watch the water leave the drain pipe and onto the beach. It formed a little channel and entered the Pacific Ocean. And I didn't know what to do, so I just sat and tried to wake up from the nightmare. That didn't work either, so I figured I'd best go back to the duplex and start packing my goods. The landlord was waiting for me with a shovel. I'd been ratted. The digging was pretty easy because of all the water washing the soil out, but the break was a long way back. Some plumber guy came a little later, and when he arrived, I made myself scarce in the cane field behind the house to check my plants, 'cause I needed something. As I sit here and recall this tragic memory, it occurs to me that when I lived at that place, there had been an earthquake. I never thought of it before writing this. That was what weakened the pipe. Maybe. The thing that ticked me off about it was that everybody knew about that pipe, but it had to break when I was demonstrating it, and I was the one who took all the blame. But at least the landlord didn't bill me for it. That's a good thing. I mean, anybody else, especially in this day and age, you would get hit for all of those costs. Those landlords would not really give you any leeway on this. I'm sorry, they got to keep their profits somehow. Story 3. When my brother and I were 5 and 4, respectively, we were little devils and refused to go to bed when we were put there. My parents eventually gave up and just went to bed. They were exhausted as they'd had a dinner party that evening. I promptly went into the lounge and went out of my parents' entire cassette tape collection, including the memoirs of my grandmother's escape from Germany in 1939, and proceeded to pull out all the tape from the cassettes and play with it. My brother, in the meantime, decided that he was hungry and that he would like a fried egg. In his 5-year-old wisdom, he got out an egg in a frying pan and put them on the stove and turned on an element. Nothing happened with the element that he was looking at, so he turned to another one. This time, the heat turned on, and once the pan was hot enough, he started frying the egg. Unfortunately, the first element he turned on had a wooden chopping board which smoldered until the heat reached my mom's food processor, which promptly started burning and melting and resulted in lots of dark black smoke and fire. My brother took the toddler down to my parents' bedroom and said, "Daddy, why is there smoke in the kitchen?" And apparently my dad went from horizontal in bed to vertically and halfway down the corridor in about 2 seconds flat. The fire was quite easily put out at the expense of my parents' nice crockery that was soaking in a bucket nearby. My dad just picked it up and threw it, plates, water and all, on the fire. In photos of the damage that we had to take for insurance purposes, there's a sort of twisted black mess of the stove and bench area, and then right in the middle of it all is a perfectly cooked fried egg. The greatest story ends. I love the image of the little perfection of the egg, which started everything, surrounded just by chaos. It was kind of lost in the plot of the story, but what happened to the tapes? If anyone remembers, with cassette tapes, it was possible to take a pencil, insert it into one of the holes in the cassette tape, and use that to wind the tapes back. Hopefully he didn't fold on the tape that hard, because that is probably going to damage the sound that's on there. But yeah, there was a lot of destruction from these two in just this short amount of time. Story 4. While in college, I spent several summers working in a salmon cannery in Alaska, and for a few seasons worked on the overnight cleaning crew. I cleaned fillers, these huge industrial revolution-looking behemoths that cut salmon into pieces and put it in cans. The final stage of cleaning these involved climbing into a cavity under the machine where the blade assembly normally sat. It was removed nightly for sharpening. We used thin wire picks, about 12 inches long, to get any last fish parts out of the machine. Inside the cavity was a big drive arm that drove the part of the machine that fed fish to the blades. This arm sat right across your chest as you worked in the cavity, and made for a handy shelf if you needed to set down your pick for a minute. Of course, one day, I left the pick on the drive arm. The line mechanics came in and installed the blade assembly, which consisted of about 16 circular blades about 3 times the diameter of a basketball and which rotated at ridiculously high RPMs as the machine ran. So, the mechanic turns on the machine only to hear a god-awful screeching sound as the pick was fed into the blades. It wiped out about half the blades on the assembly, and with no suitable backup, I took out a quarter of the plant's production capacity for the day. And this was a plant that processed 1 million pounds of very perishable fish per day. The head mechanic who heroically got this thing repaired by the next day pitched me a lot of hell, but never ratted me out. Holy hell. That might take the cake for most monetary damage caused if the fish that were going to be processed expired overnight. Story 5. My little brother and I saw someone make and use a Molotov cocktail in some action movie. We thought it was the coolest thing ever, and determined we could do the same thing and be little bad ones. Our first attempt yielded disappointing results. Somehow we neglected to realize the bottles had to be made of glass. Once that was sorted out, we tested our new creations on a big oak tree in a clearing about a mile into the forest behind our house. The bottle full of gasoline exploded just like we expected and burned that 100-foot old-growth oak down in less than an hour. We were amazed, but soon became terrified when flaming limbs began falling off the tree and setting fire to the tall, dry summer grass nearby. The fire quickly spread to nearby trees and did the only thing we could think to do: run like heck. That inferno burned for about the next 48 hours until the fire department could finally put it out. It destroyed about 40 acres of the forest land, an abandoned house, and part of a horse farm, resulting in some freaked-out horses and a lot of charred fences. Naturally, we never came forward because we were cowardly little buttholes. But we both went on to volunteer with fire departments wherever we've lived to atone for our stupidity and carelessness. In high school, we used to go out to my friend's farm and attempt totally awesome fire-based destruction every weekend. Our experiment with Molotovs began with my friend setting his jacket on fire by pouring the fuel down his back while trying to throw one incorrectly. Being set on fire helps people learn. Story 1. I've been the recipient, and later on, after my health improved, I volunteered as a wish coordinator. My original wish was to attend the Oscars. That got denied by the Academy, as they do not grant wishes. I wound up going to the People's Choice Awards as a VIP. MakeAWish flew my family to LA for a week, all expenses paid. They got us a limo for the show, paid for my dress, hair, and makeup, and we walked the red carpet and were seated very close to the stage. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The generosity of the volunteers is remarkable. They even had someone greet us at the airport on arrival. It was extremely important to me that my brother and sister were included in my wish, because my illness had robbed them of part of their childhoods. I'm forever indebted to everyone who made my wish possible. When I turned 18, I decided to volunteer as a wish coordinator to give back to an organization that did so much for me. I met with wish kids and their families. We would always arrive with a gift for all the children in the family based on a little survey they filled out. We'd talk with the child and help define their wish. It's important to determine the child's true wish and make sure that it isn't influenced by parents. The most common wish is to go to Disney. Celebrity meet and greets are the ones that often can be turned down. First, because it's undefined what a meet and greet is, It could be the child literally waving at someone, and no one wants that. And second, because not all celebrities grant wishes or can schedule time to meet wish kids. The coolest wish I worked on was a shopping spree for a boy who was confined to his room. He got $7,000 to go buy video games, TVs, a tricked-out lazy boy, etc. for the ultimate gaming setup. That's really cool that this person spent all of their time focusing on the positive and not just the negative of getting rejected by the Oscars. It's cool that they got to go to the to the People's Choice Awards. It's very generous all around, especially from the start when she had her siblings involved in it too. That was just so generous of her. Amazing. Story 2. A classmate of mine, now passed, got a meet and greet with Sammy Sosa. The understanding from the Make-A-Wish people was that Sammy Sosa would sign autographs and sit with the family for a while. Now this kid was all about Sammy. He had his jerseys, loved Sammy's little leaps after home runs, and if I recall correctly, even was big into Pepsi because of Sammy too. When the day came, Sammy showed up late. He didn't respond when the family greeted him. It was described as a sullen silence, signed a glove, and then walked away. My classmates started crying once it was clear Sammy was not going to come back. Right when the parents were about to leave, another baseball player named Corey Patterson saw my classmate, came up, signed everything they had, and talked and joked around with the family for over a half hour. Corey became my classmate's favorite player that day, and I think he lived perhaps a year after that moment. At his funeral, my classmate's picture with Corey was one of the prominent pictures. That moment and day truly meant the world to him. He was around 10 or 11, if I remember correctly. To this day, I'm unsure if someone from Make-A-Wish found Corey or if the moment was as spontaneous as it was described to me. But no matter what, Corey will always have a special place in my heart because of that story. Again, it's great to see something positive come out of a negative situation. I'm not very much of a sports person at all. I'm more of a gamer. So I don't know. I know the name Sammy Sosa. I just don't know much about his reputation or if this was normal or if this was something that just kind of happened out of the blue. Story 3. This isn't my personal story, but of my uncle who passed away shortly after I was born. He loved the Terminator so much that he wanted nothing more than to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. Due to having a busy schedule, Arnold's agent had to deny him his wish a couple of times. He was filming for the second Terminator. My uncle was so determined to meet Arnold that he then changed his wish to meeting Maria Shriver, Arnold's wife. Because of his determination, he was allowed on the set of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. He got to meet Arnold, Maria, and Arnold's stunt double. My mom still has the pictures, and it makes my heart soar. Make-A-Wish is fantastic, and I'm so glad my uncle got to live out his dream. Update. Thank you to everyone who read this and left a reply. My uncle was a great guy, and I wish I could have gotten to know him personally. I called my mom and let her know about this comment and all your responses. She loved her brother more than anything, and hearing so many people got to know one of his stories made her so happy. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad his legacy gets to live on in such a positive way. This is actually super smart of your uncle to change his wish and still get what he wanted. I remember when Terminator 2 came out, that was an event. It was a game changer as far as effects and action movies. It would have been amazing to be on the set. It's sad that this person had to have the disease or whatever it was that he had for Make-A-Wish to fulfill it, but I'm glad he got to live it out. Story 4. We did the standard Disney World trip. My son only had months to live, and we had a small window when he was well enough to go, with no lines. Bruce was 5, so he didn't really have any big or creative ideas. He had only been to Disney World once for a single day, and my husband wasn't able to come. He told the wish granters that he wanted to show Daddy the giant castle and ride roller coasters. Even though it seemed like the cookie-cutter wish, my son's Make-A-Wish experience was truly amazing. I still cry thinking about how much that trio meant to him and our entire family. My son was treated like absolute royalty during the entire trip. Volunteers we met to give the world visit, the resort where we stayed, really connected with him, and even flew in from states away where he was in hospice and for his funeral. I love reading about the amazing and unique experiences that others request. I will definitely be following this post. We became so close with our wish granters. Those people are truly angels on this earth. I'm so thankful to everyone involved in making a wish. Donors, volunteers, everyone. This organization made such a huge impact on our lives, and we made memories that our family will cherish forever. Story 5. My son chose a Disney cruise. He didn't even hesitate in his pick, probably because we were on day 1 of a Disney cruise we had been planning for over a year when he took a small tumble in our stateroom and wound up breaking his femur because, unbeknownst to us, his leg was filled with Ewing sarcoma. This trip he had been looking forward to for so long was destroyed before it even really started. So when it was wish time, he asked for a redo of our cruise. We waited until he had been off of chemo for a couple of months, and we had a wonderful time. We even added days on a Disney World from our DVC timeshare after the cruise. Both the Make-A-Wish folks and the Disney Cruise employees told my son to make sure he wore his Make-A-Wish shirt to the parks when we were there. He did one of the days, and even though that wasn't part of his wish, the Disney cast members all treated him great. It was so nice to see him have such a wonderful trip after a ruined dream vacation and a year of non-stop hospital stays. By the way, he's doing great now. Story 6. Not a recipient, but worked at a Hard Rock Cafe. A Wish Kid's wish was to see Paul McCartney live, so they came in to eat dinner before his concert down the road from the restaurant. We sat him next to some signed Beatles guitars and sheets of lyrics and such. As an avid Beatles fan myself, I was able to serve them. I sat and talked with that 6-year-old about the Beatles for a good hour, played all the Beatles songs, and had their music videos playing on the TV throughout the restaurant. It was super humbling with how excited this kid was to go see Paul and just be able to be outside the hospital for the night. And also super heartbreaking seeing his dad's face the whole dinner. I have never seen such pain, and I think about him frequently. I think about the parents whenever I see this stuff. I don't know how I'd be able to keep it together and not break down if this was one of my girls and I was out on a Make-A-Wish event with them. That's a good point. I wonder how many parents have kind of silently suffered through all this miraculous stuff going on around them and seeing the kids' eyes light up. It's kind of hard to be focused on what's going to come and try not to be present in the moment. It's kind of sad. I hope he was able to have some enjoyment from this. Story 7. I got a wish as a kid, then survived. The biggest, best thing I could think of was to go to Chuck E. Cheese's. I have no idea why I was fixated on that. To the credit of some good peeps, to Chuck E. Cheese's I went. I couldn't be around other people, so they opened it up at night. People deep cleaned it, sterilizing each ball in the ball pit. There was dedication there. Then someone who was cleared medically worked it. Don't remember most of it. I was pretty young, mostly just remembering the bits I found exciting. But that dang rat casino still makes me smile whenever I see one. Moral of the story? Never bet against Make-A-Wish when dealing with logistics. Every ball in pit. I love this. The thing that most kids take for granted was such a big deal to you, and you'd think that would be a simple wish to grant. But it sounds like they thought about everything and took as much care with your wish as they would for someone going to Disney. Story 8. My son was a Make-A-Wish recipient. He wanted to go to Europe. They were planning it, and his birth father wouldn't allow my kids to get passports. Great father, huh? Son had like 36% chance of survival from brain cancer, and he said no passports. Anyway, his second wish was an RV trip to the Badlands, Yellowstone, and the Rockies. They got us the biggest bus type, think it's A-class RV they could get, set everything up for us, gave us itineraries, and off we went. It's such an incredible organization, and luckily, my son had a blast after finally having the okay to go. He's also in remission and doing well, thank God. Making a wish is incredible. Houses. When I was in high school, there was a girl that wanted a dollhouse, so Make-A-Wish approached my woodshop teacher. He wasn't having any of that. We ended up building her a 2-story playhouse with a working kitchen. Story 1. Sorry for the messy mobile post. Forgive me, online gods. Too long didn't read? Extreme emotions, lack or struggle with impulse control, blackouts, extreme irritability, disrupted sleep, muted or bottled emotions, feeling like an alien, feeling like everyone has an ulterior motive, self-isolation, preoccupation with pleasing others or avoiding conflict, feeling of emptiness, feeling like part of your identity is missing, or you don't have an identity of your own, subtle tendencies to latch on to others, especially romantic partners or crushes. Maybe sometimes you feel like you're just a tad too much, or maybe you've heard that from some exes. Went to school for forensic psych before I had to drop out due to my own unchecked mental illness. Turns out my worldview has been wrong my whole life, and I thought everyone was like this because my family members were like this. Even though I was in and out of therapy my whole life for depression and anxiety, nobody spotted the BPD because I didn't know these feelings needed to be talked about. Never caught the borderline until my head became such a dangerous place. I wasn't sure I'd ever function again or be able to have the relationships I craved with my loved ones. Another example is my significant other. He's always had muted emotions, not a lot of expressed passion about the things he likes or believes are important. Not even enough to vote before we got together. Most people with SPD will feel this detachment and think it's fine, but they can be really struggling and not know why, or even not know that there's a problem, like heart disease. I won't lie that in some cases, having schizoid is almost encouraged, work of nearly every kind. However, it very seriously impacts the quality of life for the person, sometimes making them feel like they have no place in this world. Hint: everyone needs a therapist. Original person, thank you. What a great post. You've got a lot of people talking, which further normalizes talking about and acting on mental well-being. That was a big laundry list to have to go through at the beginning of this story. I think we've all had some of those sort of behaviors from time to time, but seeing as all of those can become much more compounded the more of them that you have, I think that we all need someone, if not a therapist, someone that we trust very, very much to let us know if our behavior, our outlook isn't quite what would be considered normal. I hope anyone can find that kind of person or that kind of therapist. Story 2. Not a therapist or a mental health professional, but a patient who has had major depression and heaps of anxiety for a very long time. Safe to say, a majority of my life. For depression, exhaustion with no cause, feeling numb, random bursts of anger, losing interest in favorite things, mental dullness, drops in grade/work ethic, wanting to vanish, believing others would be better off without you, feeling like a burden, getting sick more often, isolating yourself. Casual, self-unaliving thoughts. My own big example of this and own experience was walking down a road with my sister and thinking casually, I could just sidestep in front of a car and be terminated, just popped into my head. Feeling worthless, intrusive thoughts, staring off into space for hours and hours, random crying spells, feeling like you deserve to be unhappy, for anxiety, feeling suffocated in a crowded place, stammering, getting frustrated over something simple, going mute, dry mouth, being hyper-aware of everyone, feeling like everyone is watching you, feeling like you're being watched, feeling like you're being judged constantly, feeling like people are out to get you, feeling like certain things are traps, like you were set up for failure, feeling sick before you're supposed to do something, uncontrollable shaking, insomnia, an uncontrollable sense of dread, imagining the worst possible case scenario, being afraid to leave your home. Some of these overlap, of course, and all of these are my own personal experiences and symptoms. They vary from person to person. Please do not be ashamed to get help. These people want to help you. If you can't afford help, please try and find a free clinic. You deserve to be happy. You deserve not to feel like total junk. Even if you did go to a mental hospital, these people really care. They want to make you better. Mental illness is just that, an illness. Don't deny yourself the help you need and deserve. You wouldn't brush off a potentially serious physical illness, so don't brush off a potentially serious mental illness. I think a lot of us tend to view the old school trope of TV and movies of the sinister mental hospital, a dreary place, and the doctors that for some reason just want to keep you under their control for some reason. That gets a lot of attention, even in recent movies. I think it's only recently that psychology has been viewed as something that you go to for help, for some kind of wisdom or some kind of way to deal with it. Story 3. A good rule of thumb as to whether a behavior or symptom should be checked out is the same we use to determine a diagnosable disorder, if it causes impairment in one or more areas of your life. The range of what is normal is huge, but if something keeps you from going to school or work, keeps you from maintaining basic hygiene, from maintaining your friendships, familial relationships, romantic relationships, it's causing impairment, and you should seek help. Edits. Wanted to clarify a few things. 1. This is not an exhaustive criteria for diagnosable mental illness. There are many criteria we consider in diagnosing, but the one criteria that is present for all is that it must cause impairment. 2. Enjoyment is also an important aspect of functioning. If you're getting by in your life but are miserable, get help. You don't have to live like that. 3. Serial killers and psychopaths represent a very small percentage of the population and rarely seek help willingly. This was not directed at them. 4. The area of functioning I listed are general examples pulled from the Western culture where I live and was trained. Different cultures have different values, and the norms of your culture should be taken into account. 5. If you're unbothered by your level of functioning in these areas relative to cultural expectations, good for you. Most people considering this advice likely have a sense that something is not where they want it to be in their life and are looking for confirmation that it's bad enough to seek help. If you're not concerned, my advice is not directed at you. 6. No one is saying that being content with having no interpersonal connections is inherently pathological. Also, thanks for the awards and all the responses. I really enjoyed reading and responding. I think that's very important. It didn't really click in my mind that impairment is something that would be inherent through mental illness like it would for a physical illness. It seems obvious now, if you've got an injury that, if you injure your hand that prevents you from working or operating a computer, you would seek help for that. Yes, same thing with a mental illness, I guess. I had never thought of that before. Story 4. The need for some patients to speak with their children about adult problems. No, your young child does not need to be aware that you're struggling financially or that Daddy slept with the lady next door. The parents that tell their children that they're going to go and speed my car into a tree purposely, unalive myself while you're at school, or slit my wrist when I shower tonight, and parents that feel they need their children fixed, as it's the child and not the family unit as the whole that needs support and/or assistance. Just a few recent ones I've heard. Edit. Sorry about format. Commenting via mobile phone. Edit. Thanks for the gold. My first one. Edit. In regards to financial comments, taken from a previous comment of mine as I've been getting asked to answer this, I'm talking more on the extreme side, and towards children that have been extremely hurt, and money talk was used as a tool to make the child feel at fault and guilt to some degree. I'm currently working with a child now that is triggered whenever he hears talk about finances and feels it's his fault they will eventually become homeless. They won't, but this is what he's told. If only he didn't eat so much, if only he didn't have so many school fees. Not to mention the arguing between cares over finances. This must be his fault too, though. They're yelling and shouting because of this. The parents that tell their children that they're going to go and speed my car into a tree purposely, unalive myself while you're at school. My own mother took this one step further and threatened to drive both herself and I into a telephone pole if my grades didn't pick up. Story 5. There have been a lot of my patients who have been pretty surprised when I've told them, hey, that's anxiety or depression, when they just thought their behaviors were typical for everyone. Not being able to maintain friendships, constantly being nervous about the safety of your child to the point where you hate being alone with your child without your partner, not being able to motivate yourself to do things, especially things you once enjoyed, feeling excessively tired all the time, not being able to calm down and just think about the same thoughts over and over and feeling worried. Other things we can help you with. Having a hard time trusting others, trying to recover a relationship from infidelity, not knowing why your kid is misbehaving so much and needing guidance, helping to improve communication within your relationships. If you experience these things and more, therapists can help. Let us help you. Edited to add. I've noticed the cost coming up in a lot of these replies. I hate that cost is such a barrier for people. Sometimes colleges offer free or discounted therapy from their students. When you're training to be a therapist, you spend at least 1 year working as a therapist while meeting with a supervisor each week to consult on your cases and get guidance on moving forward. My college unfortunately didn't offer discounted sessions, but I know many do. It might be worth checking out. Some systems also have charity care options for people with low incomes. That can be worth pursuing as well. To find a therapist, if you're in the U.S., you can call your insurance company and get a list of places that take your insurance. That's a good place to start.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.